Good morning and welcome to the ABC's coverage of the 2024 Anzac Day March along Elizabeth Street in Sydney. We're coming to you live from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that we're on and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us today. I have three serving members with me now who form our commentary team for this morning. Please welcome Captain Philippa Hay of the Royal Australian Navy, Colonel Warwick Young of the Australian Army, and Squadron Leader Eamon Hamilton of the Royal Australian Air Force. And I might start with you, Warwick. What does Anzac Day mean to you?
Well, Anzac Day is a day when, I always like to think about the sacrifices that have made by all of our forebears for the wonderful country that we live in. And I also like to think about those Australians that are in the services serving right now overseas and indeed even here at home, keeping us safe.
Yeah, and Philippa, we're here in Sydney, but how is Anzac Day being observed around the country and around the world?
You certainly don't need to attend a parade or a cenotaph to be able to commemorate. Luke and his mates are halfway through the Kokoda Trail raising funds for legacy today. They'll pause and remember. Station Master Beck down at Mawson, she'll be catching the last rays of sun with her team, and even my own sister is pausing over in the Falkland Islands. So Australians everywhere will use their initiative and pause and remember.
Okay, and Eamon, tell us about some of the key anniversaries happening this year.
Well, this year there's a significant number of anniversaries that will be observed by many veterans, their families, their friends and their relatives. We have the 80th anniversary of the Allied landings in D-Day, on which thousands of Australians supported in the air, on the land, at sea, but also peacekeeping operations such as Interfet and Rwanda that many Australians served on more recently, marking their 25th and 30th anniversaries more recently. Disaster relief operations, Cyclone Tracy in Darwin marking its 50th anniversary this year, and Boxing Day Tsunami marking its 20th anniversary. These are activities and operations and deployments that many Australians will be stopping to observe and remember today.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining us, and stay with us as we begin the 2024 Anzac Day March here in Sydney. Well, it's an absolutely beautiful, clear, sunny day here in Sydney, and quite a nice turnout as well of the public. Last year, I think there were over 11,000 participants who marched, and it looks to be a similar turnout this year. Philippa?
It's looking absolutely beautiful. The harbour is glimmering, and this morning down at the dawn service there were thousands down there, a beautiful service. So I hope everyone's had their breakfast and they're now ready for the parade.
Yes, and now in the distance we can see the vanguard ready to step off, led by the police, motorcycle riders and mounted police. And as with all our participants today, they begin at Martin Place and Elizabeth Street, then they'll head south past the historic Supreme Court buildings, where seating has been set aside for veterans and war widows at St James Road. Then the participants will continue along Elizabeth Street. They'll go past the Anzac Memorial in Hyde Park, where participants direct their eyes left as an act of remembrance. And then the march will finish at Liverpool Street, where the formations will disperse.
And here we see the New South Wales Police motorcycles. They're in a V formation, and they're followed by the police on a more traditional mode of transport, the horseback. And the police leader today is Inspector Sally Rogers, who's riding Troop Horse Navajo. Inspector Rogers holds the position of officer in charge. Riding with Inspector Rogers is Sergeant Melinda Murray. She's riding Troop Horse Prince. Something important to remember about the New South Wales Mounted Police Unit is it is the oldest continuous mounted unit in the world. The unit was formed initially in 1825. They're absolutely magnificent. The police use these horses operationally, obviously, not only for the ceremonial duties, but they also use them for riot control and crowd control.
Coming up behind the police, we can see our march leader. It is our Governor of New South Wales, Her Excellency, the Honourable Margaret Beazley. She's the 39th Governor of New South Wales. Fabulous to have you here this morning, ma'am, and hopefully you've got a clear path on the road. Accompanying Her Excellency this morning is Major Ed Chang, who's the Honorary Controller, Lieutenant Torsten Uch, the aide-de-camp, and Squadron Leader Mike King.
And here is our first band of the morning, and it's the Royal Australian Navy Band, administered by HMAS Cuttable, taking the honour of being the duty band for today. And the RAN band consists of approximately 50 full-time members under the musical direction of Lieutenant Commander Andrew Stokes, and is being led by Drum Major Chief Petty Officer Lucas Kennedy. And the Royal Australian Navy Band, it's been around for over 110 years since its inception in 1913. The RAN Band Sydney provides regular ceremonial support to Fleet Base East and New South Wales establishments, and support is most often provided as a full 35-piece military marching band. The RAN Band also maintains a close relationship with the New South Wales community, performing at school events, concerts, music festivals, charity events, as well as large sporting events.
And directly behind the band we see the New South Wales State Council and the New South Wales Veterans Association. And behind them, the New South Wales RSL Director of the Board, which includes Phil Chin, Paul James, Sarah Watson and Louise Sullivan, marching with the President of the New South Wales RSL, Mick Bainbridge. Interestingly, we also saw the past President of the RSL there, Ray James. And here we've got our World War II veterans. It's wonderful that we can still get these guys and ladies out there so that we can honour their service. And here we have the New Zealand Return Services.
That's right, they're being led today by Air Commodore Nick Osborne with the Royal Australian Air Force, who joined the RAF in 2002, having previously served 20 years in the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a fast jet pilot with over 4,500 hours in jets during his career. He's still serving today up at Headquarters Air Command at RAF Base Glenbrook. The New Zealand contingent have been marching since the first Anzac Day march in Sydney after World War II, and have used the same banner template ever since, as well as the New Zealand flag.
And our second band for the morning is the Scots College Pipes and Drums, and they've proudly worn the tartan of the Black Watch, the Royal Highland Regiment, since they were given permission to do so back in 1931. The band started in 1900 when 5 boys joined the cadets as pipers, At present, there are over 500 boys learning to play or playing the bagpipes or drums. And since 1900, the pipes and drums boast a proud record of representing the college at national and international venues, as well as regal and vice-regal functions.
They look fantastic, actually. You know, last year they were at the Edinburgh Tattoo, the Scots band.
The band is being followed by the Australian National Flag contingent. These are 200 flags carried by tri-service cadets from the Australian Navy Cadets, the Australian Army Cadets and the Australian Air Force Cadets. A decision was made some years ago that a massed flag contingent should lead the march every year. The flags have been displayed wherever Australian troops have been deployed.
And while we're on the subject of flags, a shout out to the posties who have been busy handing flags out to the people lining the streets here today. It's great to see them all.
It certainly brings more colour to the sidelines of the parade, Carl.
And next are the memorial horses representing veterans from the Boer and the Great War. These riderless horses have boots reversed in the stirrups, symbolising the fallen soldiers who did not return home. And the 1st Light Horse Regiment AAF was raised in New South Wales on August 11, 1914 and embarked from Sydney on October 20, 1914. They fought at Gallipoli from May 12 to the evacuation on December 20, 1915. And next are the World War I unit flags, as we see them held en masse, representing every unit of the Australian Army that deployed and fought in World War I. Each of these flags carries the colour patch from an operating unit of the 1st AAF. And the first row has colours from the famous Light Horse regiments, followed by battalions, regiments from the 5 divisions.
And here we have the New South Wales Police Band, which was established in 1895. It's the longest standing concert band in Australia. And it's a full-time unit with professional musicians who are employed as special constables. And it's one of the few areas within the New South Wales Police Force which provides high-profile public relations support and activities to the New South Wales Police, both state and federal governments and the community of New South Wales.
And behind the police band is the New South Wales Police Force Veterans. These are veterans and police force members representing a long history of military service. Serving members have fought in a number of conflicts going right back to the Boer War, subsequently the Great War in World War II, Malayan conflict, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, and more recently in Afghanistan.
And next we have the taxis. Now these taxis, including historic ones, have been in the Anzac Day March for almost 70 years and play a vital role in helping many of our veterans attend the march. They allow our senior veterans to conserve their strength so that they are able to pay their respects to their past comrades. It's a great service they provide. The taxis pick up the veterans from their homes and bring them to us here in the March. And this year holds a special significance as it marks 2 decades since the RSL Cab's vintage vehicles first attended the March. And don't they look fantastic?
And if you've just joined us, a warm welcome to you while we watch the taxis travel slowly down Elizabeth Street. We hope you can stay with us right through the morning and indeed the afternoon. Later we'll cross live to Gallipoli and Villas Bretonneau for their dawn services. And at 3 p.m, don't miss the Many Days of Anzac documentary, which looks at how Anzac Day has evolved over the years.
Looks like there's a fantastic turnout this year. Look at all of those people along the side of the road.
I'm just loving that the taxis are able to bring our fellow veterans to the parade every year so they can continue to participate.
Yeah, I agree, Philippa. It is wonderful. And it's important for these veterans to feel like they are still really valued for what they've done, and to see this crowd giving them what they're giving them today, it really it warms the heart and brings a tear to the eye.
Bit of luck, these taxis might take them straight down to the RSL and then safely home again.
I think there might be a nice beverage waiting for them as well.
And our next band is the Corrective Services New South Wales Band, which was originally formed in 1981 to provide essential ceremonial support to Corrective Services New South Wales and the New South Wales Government. And the band is now comprised of 45 professional casual musicians led by a full-time music director, Deputy Superintendent John Buckley, who was appointed to this role more than 10 years ago. And the drum major, principal musician Andrew Robinson, is the longest serving member of the band. The Corrective Services New South Wales Band is a unique public relations asset that actively contributes to the status and reputation of corrective services to the people of New South Wales through public performances, community engagement at every level. Band is very proud to be continuing its long association with the Anzac Day March.
Behind the Corrective Services Band, here comes the contingent from the Royal Australian Navy. Here we have, leading the Australian contingent, Commodore Ray Leggett, who is acting Australian Fleet Commander. And behind him will be the previous service from the Royal Australian Navy, and we're looking forward to welcoming him then. This year is the first time that the Navy contingent hasn't been led by Rear Admiral Guy Griffith, who fortunately passed the other side today. Total legend, and truly sorely missed from the Royal Australian Navy. In the Land Rover, you can see, is Don Kennedy OAM. He is 97 years old. He joined the Merchant Navy when he was 16 years old, which was pretty normal in those days. He later joined the US Army Transport Corps ship, providing ammunition and provisions for the forces, because as we know, without your logistics, nothing's going to happen. In February, Don was awarded the Merchant Mariners of World War II Congressional Gold Medal, honouring his dedication of heroism and public service. He joined an impressive list of recipients, including Nelson Mandela, Pope John Paul II, Mother Teresa, and the Dalai Lama. And here comes the HMAS Australia Veterans Association, led by Christine Robertson. We've had several HMAS Australias. The first one was the Indefatigable class, a battle cruiser, and Australia 2 was the County class heavy cruiser. You may be familiar with some of the Australia stories, and one, of course, was Australia 2. She is best known from surviving kamikaze attacks, or not really surviving them, sustaining them in the Leyte Gulf, and many officers were killed, including the captain, Deschano, of whom one of our Collins-class submarines named after. There's a fabulous painting of the Australia in the Australia Memorial, which is by Alan Hall. Canberra and Shropshire, the sister ships of the Australia. Tragically, Canberra was lost in the Battle of Savo Island, and the British gifted the Shropshire. It was intended to have the Shropshire renamed to the Canberra, but the Americans named one of their ships the Canberra in honour of our lost Canberra. Both ships went on to serve, and the Shropshire continued to serve up in the Southwest Pacific. And here comes the Warramunga Association. Good to have them here today. We won't see Warramunga current in service. She's on her way home from deployment, but fantastic to have the association here. The first Warramunga was the Tribal class destroyer and was one of the fastest ships in the Royal Australian Navy. Here we have the Arunta Association. We will see her ships come today, but fantastic to see the veterans and families from the Tribal class destroyer. She was launched back in 1942, and during the Second World War, she sunk a Japanese submarine off Port Moresby. And here we have the Tobruk Association. The March leader is Commander Les Pataki, currently retired. HMAS Melbourne Association, marching together now with members from the Fleet Air Arm Association. Leading the Melbourne contingent is the president of the association, Craig Hooley. And now we have the Naval Association of New South Wales. And behind them, the Yarra Association. Marching today are members from Yarra 3 and ex-Yarra 4 crews, and they're being led by its president, Ray Vidler, the Chief Petty Officer who served in Yarra 3 from 1979 to 1986. can see there the ship's company of the current HMAS Yarra, a Huon-class minehunter, are marching with the association. Lovely to bring current serving and veterans together. Behind them, they have the Naval Warfare Association, led by President Tony Flint. And I can see Charlie's doing a great job of keeping him in step. This is the Warfare Association, a contingent that's open to past and present warfare officers within the Royal Australian Navy with experience in naval operations at sea. It was initially the ASW Association, but these days it's for all naval warfare officers. Following on behind, we have the Communications Association. We all know, no comms, no bombs. Very important to get them out there. Led today by Commander Andy Mannon. And here come the Navy Women's Association, formerly known as the RANS. Huge shout out to these ladies who are the forebearers and have helped me be where I am today, as to many women across all three services, led by their president, Karen Burke. Many of these ladies are in their late 90s and yet still are able to get out and parade. Following on behind the Navy Women's Association is the Silent Service, the Submarine Association, New South Wales branch. Everyone knows the submarines are out there. They're the first in and the last out. Led today by the association's president, Ken Norris. The submariners have been marching in Sydney since 1936. At the front of Navy Health, we have Captain Kate Tyndall. Since 1901, the Navy Health Services have provided support to the Royal Australian Navy and the Australian Defence Force. We see them afloat, ashore, and they make sure that we're fit and healthy in all our facets. Behind Navy Health, we have the Sydney Association, formed in 1962, and today the contingent's led by Associate Patron Commodore Paul Cable. The banner on the Sydney banner reflects the 14 banner honours awarded to the 4 HMAS Sydneys, including action which saw the sinking of the German battleship the Emden in 1914 during the Great War. Astern of Sydney, we have the Merchant Navy. Not often spoken of, but the Merchant Navy is what keeps our ship lanes open and our logistics moving. These are dedicated mariners who take risks to make sure that our logistics and our supplies keep us moving around the region and keep our sea lanes open so that we can enjoy the joys of iPads and washing machines.
And this is the Northern Suburbs Pipe Band, which formed in 1952. The band is self-funded, made up of volunteers who come from all over the Sydney metropolitan area, as well as Wollongong and the Central Coast.
Behind the pipes, HMAS Hobart. Can always rely on the RAF to try and outstrip the Navy.
And above the pipes, a F-35.
Thanks, Eamon. HMAS Hobart, Green Ghost, led by Commander Peter Watson, currently retired. Peter served on board when Hobart was up in Vietnam. The stern of Hobart, Warship Brisbane Association, led by their patron, Captain Ralph Dirtridge, and their president, Captain Jeff Cole. The first Brisbane served during World War I, and the second Brisbane was part of the Adams-class destroyers and notably fired the last shot by the Royal Australian Navy in the Vietnam War. And she also assisted with the disaster relief up in Darwin. This year marks 50 years since Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin in the early hours of Christmas morning in 1974. 71 people died and more than 600 were injured, and 80% of the city was destroyed. The cyclone, which was among one of the most destructive ever recorded in Australia, also changed the face of Darwin. And here we see the Vendetta Veterans Association. The first Vendetta was a V-class destroyer that was part of the famous Scrap Iron Flotilla. There's a smashing book by Mark Carlton that you can read about the Scrap Iron Flotilla. HMAS Darwin Association. Darwin was the last of the 4 Oliver Hazard-class guided missile frigates that were built for the Royal Australian Navy in Seattle in the US, and was the first ship to be named after the city of Darwin. Behind the Darwin, we have the Tingira Association, today led by Mark Lee, who's been the secretary since its inception in 2001. And here comes the contingent from the Australian Mine Warfare Association with veterans and current serving, led by Lieutenant Commander Simon Abley, whose Navy career covers nearly 2 decades. This was established in 1917, and the association represents sailors and officers who have served in mine warfare ships and units and who are specialised mine warfare rates. But I didn't need to read the banner for this. I can tell from the physique. Here comes the divers. This is the Clearance Diving Association. Fit, fine officers and sailors. These are specialist Navy divers who carry out mine clearance operations and disposal of explosive ordnance. If you're wondering why those divers look so fit, look behind them. Here come the physical training instructors, the PTIs, the club swingers, led by Warrant Officer Physical Training Instructor Corey Short. Now, you might wonder why they're called club swingers. If you see on their banner, there are Indian clubs, which we used to use for strengthness and fitness. And here comes your current serving Royal Australian Navy, led by Commander of Surface Command, Commodore Terry Morrison. And would you believe that's his daughter out the front on the life ring, who herself is a Navy cadet over at TS Sydney. Surface Force consists of a number of groups and departments that all work together to make sure all our major fleet units are operational and ready at sea.
And our next band is the Manly Warringah Pipe Band, which is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year and also returning to perform at the Basel Tattoo in Switzerland in July, having participated twice before, as well as at the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo in Scotland several times. And the band is often seen performing across the northern beaches of Sydney, and many of the band members who are marching today have learnt to play the bagpipes or drums through the band. Not an easy job to play bagpipes and march, by the way. It takes a lot of oxygen. lot of coordination, yes.
And behind those heavy-breathing pipers, here comes HMAS Canberra. Had to have a change of motto this year. King and Country. She is now led by Captain Brendan O'Hara. Canberra's the lead ship of our 2 Canberra-class helicopter docking ships, our amphibious assault ships, and they are berthed down here at Garden Island. They're those big flat ones that you see. Remarkable ships able to conduct amphibious operations and land a force of over 1,000 embarked personnel.
And they've got a significant Army contingent on board as well.
This is not a Navy ship, this is a joint capability. When you have a look on board at the ship's company, you'll see there's Air Force down the front, there's Navy throughout, and Army. This ship comes to life when you embark the forces, the helicopters, the troops, the vehicles. If you want to see something exciting, Google the Australian Amphibious Force.
Yes, indeed, and they provide a great capability for this nation.
Now, if you're wondering who looks after all these troops when they come alongside, astern of the Canberra is HMAS Cuttable, our naval base here down at Garden Island, led today by Captain Rebecca Levitt. Cuttable administer every sailor who is not posted to a ship or an establishment within the Sydney region, so it ends up around 700 personnel. Cuttable was first commissioned on the 1st of January in 1943 and was named after the Sydney ferry Cuttable. There's a couple of things you might not be aware of. The word Cuttable is actually Aboriginal for wonderful. And also, Cuttable was originally named after HMAS Penguin at the outbreak of the Second World War. It was renamed Cuttable in memory of the sailors who were killed during the Japanese midget submarine attack. There's 2 contingents of Cuttable marching there. Lots of people based in Sydney. We are a Navy town.
And here we have the New South Wales Police Pipe Band, which was formed in 1946 by Commissioner William John Mackay as a group of experienced pipers and drummers who were serving members of the New South Wales Police. To honour their founder and patron, the band adopted the ancient tartan and the crest of Clan Mackay.
Astern of the band, we have HMAS Supply, led by the commanding officer, Dave Clarkson. Supply is one of our new replenishment ships. You'll see her down at Garden Island, and she has a sister ship. They keep us underway at sea, and having a replenishment capability at sea makes us a world-class Navy. Astern of her is her sister ship, the Stord. Led by the commanding officer, Marley Madrak. Stern of Stalled, we have HMAS Penguin over there on Middle Head, led by the Commanding Officer, Commander Kent Browning. There's over 200 personnel marching today from Penguin. Penguin has multiple roles. Over there we have the Dive School, a School of Health, Hydrographic School, and some other smaller specialist units. Astern of Penguin, we have HMAS Waterhen, tucked in down there in North Sydney. It's the home of Australia's mine hunter coastal ships, our maritime deployed robotic autonomous systems, our clearance divers, and our amphibious watercraft squadron. And here comes HMAS Perth. Commanding Officer of HMAS Perth is, of course, Commander George Mackey. She's an Anzac class frigate, proudly serving out of Sydney.
And here we have the Castle Hill RSL Youth Band. So formerly the City of Sydney Youth Band, the Castle Hill RSL Youth Band is regarded as one of Australia's finest symphonic wind orchestras, and they participate regularly in state and national band championships. And they're dedicated to providing outstanding grounding in wind orchestra repertoire. The YWO has an extensive annual performance calendar of approximately 20 engagements each year. And the members range in age from as young as 11 through to 19 years of age.
And here we have the Steel Cat HMAS Brisbane coming up behind the band, led by Commander Bernie Dobson. She is the second of the 3 Hobart-class guided missile destroyers. And she's a state-of-the-art phased array radar in combination with SM-2 missiles. Very potent force out there. Always good to be at sea with the DDG. Quick shout out to Able Seaman Tilliard Natusha's dad, Kiora, over in Auckland. And Mum, g'day, you're up in Cairns. Hello, Central Australia. Here comes HMAS Arunta, led by Commander Dave Smith, who assumed command last year. Arunta 2 is one of eight Anzac-class frigates, and she was built over in Williamstown, down in Victoria. Here comes the Swiss Army knife of the Royal Australian Navy, HMAS Chuld, only the second ship ever to be named after a rating, led by Commander Aaron Convoy. Chuld is an amphibious capable ship, and she can do anything. She can lift, she can fly, she can transit independently, she can integrate into other forces. If you're wondering where we learn all our skills, it's out there at HMAS Watson. HMAS Watson, Captain Aaron Scott, with over 600 personnel, which will be staff, instructors and trainees. It's the home of Australia's premier warfighting and communication schools. Located out on beautiful Watson Bay, and I tell you what, if you haven't seen the views from South Head, you're missing out. Watson was commissioned as a land-based ship's Navy radar training school in 1945, and in 1956 the torpedo and anti-submarine warfare schools were added. And today, it remains the cradle for all maritime warfare skills. Interspersed amongst the HMAS Watson, you can see some green. That may surprise some, but Army, we are training you to drive ships.
You are indeed. In fact, as we take on our littoral force and we get more ships into the Army's capability, we will actually be the second largest Navy in the region.
At least you're being trained by the best, mate.
We are indeed, we are indeed.
And our next band is the North Ryde RSL Pipe Band, which was originally formed in 1932 as part of the Epping and District Scottish Society. So the band's always been active in Anzac Day. They first participated in the City of Sydney March in 1934. And the aim of the band has been to promote Scottish music and culture, and to that end have a substantial training program teaching the pipes and drums. And the band's also been successful in implementing a training program with James Roos Agricultural High School. So re-establishing their pipe band.
Stern of the pipe band, we've got HMAS Diamantina, led by Lieutenant Commander Georgina Ray Martin. Diamantina is one of Huon class Minehunter Coastals, and they're based over at Waterhen. Stern of her is Huon. Big shout out to all the Taswegians out there, including my own parents and Admiral Dutoit. Huon, another highly capable mine warfare ship that's based over at HMAS Waterhen. And our final Royal Australian Navy contingent, only at the back because she's our most junior commander serving out of Sydney, is Lieutenant Commander Libby Newman and the permanent Royal Australian Navy crew of the training ship Young Endeavour.
And our next band here is the Fire and Rescue New South Wales Band. Now, the origins of the Fire and Rescue New South Wales Band date back to 1894, when it was then known as the Paddington Brewery Volunteer Fire Brigade Band.
The band is being followed by the New South Wales Fire and Rescue Veterans. This year, Fire and Rescue celebrates 140 years as the professional fire service, and the contingent today is led by Commissioner Jeremy Futrell, AFSM. For more than 100 years, since the early 1920s, Fire and Rescue New South Wales has been marching as a unit on Sydney Anzac Day. Since 1928, before they joined the march, the Fire and Rescue New South Wales conducts a remembrance service at No. 1 Station in Castlemaine. Their contingent today is made up of retired and serving officers and firefighters, as well as administration and trades personnel. They employ over 400 former ADF personnel.
Importantly, Jeremy Frutel, their commissioner, he worked closely with us during Operation Bushfire Assist, floods and in COVID, and he's an outstanding individual, as are all of the men and women of Fire and Rescue New South Wales.
And this year, the Anzac Memorial celebrates its 90-year anniversary. The memorial was intended to be a memorial to all Australians who lost their lives in service during the First World War, not just the soldiers from the Gallipoli campaign to whom the term Anzac was first attached. And the imagery and symbolism in the statues and artwork and the inscriptions in the building itself reflect all the campaigns involving Australians and all the armed forces and auxiliary services that took part.
Indeed, the image that we have, the statue that sits at the centre of the memorial, is based on the old Spartan warrior that is draped over his shield. The Spartans would often say, their mothers to their sons, do not come back unless you're on your shield, because Spartans carried their dead who died in battle on a shield. If you had to drop the shield, which was quite heavy, it meant you'd run away in battle like a coward. So this here is a very important memorial, and its symbolism is fantastic.
I believe that there's a service at 12:30 today at the memorial in Hyde Park, which everyone is welcome to join. It will be broadcast. Yes, it will be broadcast. I'm getting the nod.
And our next band is the Australian Army Band Sydney, which is one of the 5 full-time professional military bands within the Australian Army Band Corps. The band regularly provides musical support for ceremonial and training activities conducted by the Australian Defence Force in support of various regal, vice-regal, federal, state, territory and local government agencies, as well as community engagement programs. They provide support to charitable events and school music education programs. Members of the band are also selected to represent Australia and the Army at significant international events, including military tattoos and Anzac and remembrance ceremonies and commemorations.
And here we have the Australian Army being led by the 5th Brigade. The 5th Brigade is the New South Wales Brigade and is combined of arms and services. The first unit we see leading them is the 1st 15th Royal New South Wales Lancers. That unit has its headquarters out at Parramatta at Lancer Barracks, which is, funnily enough, the oldest barracks in Australia. Most people think that it is Victoria Barracks, where I work at present, but actually Lancer Barracks is older. The brigade is made up of infantry, armour, engineers and combat service support.
And here we have the combined bands of the 5th Brigade, the Australian Army. So the combined bands of the 5th Brigade consists of the regimental band of the 1st 15th Royal New South Wales Lancers and the 4th Battalion Royal New South Wales Regiment Band. And the bands today have combined to support the Army's 5th Brigade marching contingent. The Lancer Band today marches for its 133rd year of service, having marched since the first Sydney Anzac Day Parade in 1921. And the Lancer Band has a strong social media profile on YouTube and Facebook, but they also maintain traditional military band capability alongside modern popular music formats.
And the 5th Brigade contingent today was made up of soldiers from the 2nd 17th Battalion Royal New South Wales Regiment, the 4th Battalion Royal New South Wales Regiment, 1st 15th Royal New South Wales Lancers, the 5th Combat Service Support Battalion and the 5th Engineer Regiment. Importantly, in all of the domestic operations we've had recently, bushfires, COVID assist and the floods, those responses were formed. The Joint Task Force that took part in it was formed based on the 5th Brigade's headquarters. And here we have the 2nd Field Regiment. 2nd Field Regiment was from the 6th Division, as you can see on the banner there. It had service in Libya, Greece, Crete, Atapi and Wewak. It was initially formed in Victoria, and they were famous for their stand at Thermopylae in Greece, which is also a very, very famous ancient Greek battlefield.
Keeping them in step is the Presbyterian Ladies College City Pipes and Drums. Good to see them out there. PLC, beautiful school up there on the North Shore. Great work, pipers and drummers.
Yeah, the Presbyterian Ladies College Sydney Pipes and Drums, they were formed in 2005. The 20-member band is an integral part of many of the school's events and external functions.
And here we have the 67 mobile searchlight battery. These mobile searchlight batteries were incredibly important during the war because they enabled the anti-aircraft artillery to identify aircraft at night that were trying to bomb the coast of Australia. The service they provided was outstanding.
We are very happy.
And here we have the City of Sydney 2nd 1st Infantry Battalion. As you can see by the battle honours, they fought in the Middle East and at Kokoda in New Guinea and in other areas of operation in the Pacific, Southwest Pacific.
It's great seeing families, members out there keeping up the tradition, keeping their memories alive and continuing to tell the stories.
It is indeed. That's a fantastic image right there. A young man fighting, marching with a photo of his relative. And here we have the 2nd Infantry Battalion, the City of Newcastle Battalion as it is known, with 15 battle honours, including Bardia and Tobruk in Libya, and Tempe Gorge in Greece. After that, they were sent to New Guinea, and the 2nd recaptured Templeton's Crossing on the Kokoda track. 3rd Battalion, known as the Werriwa Regiment. It fought all of Australia's enemies during World War II. The Italians in Libya, the Germans in Greece and Crete, the Vichy French in Syria and Lebanon, and the Japanese in New Guinea. And here we have the Pioneer Battalions. The Pioneer Battalions are an interesting unit. They're a cross between an infantry unit and an engineer. And here we have the 2nd 4th Battalion, Royal Australian Armoured Regiment. They formed in 1942 near Wee-Waa, and the 2nd 4th were among the first units to utilise tanks in jungle warfare, operating the 25-ton Matilda tanks.
And following them, it's the Riverwood Hornets Australian Cadet Corps. So it's the marching band, now part of the Australian Cadet Corps, and it's the first band in this fairly new organisation. In the past 10 years, the band has competed twice in the World Association of Marching Show Bands in Japan and Denmark, and it's received the bronze medals each time. They also travelled to Hawaii to participate in the 2019 Pearl Harbor commemoration services. And this year we'll be travelling to Normandy, France to participate in the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings.
And here we have the 2nd 4th Infantry Battalion Association, and led by Paris McDougall. The 2nd 4th Australian Infantry Battalion was in continuous operation since 1943, throughout the whole war. Originally part of the 16th Brigade, the 2nd 4th sailed to the Middle East with the 1st troops, and the unit fought in Libya, Greece and Crete. And after returning to Australia, the battalion fought against the Japanese in New Guinea. And the 2-5 Field Regiment. This regiment is famous because Roden Cutler VC was a member of it, former Governor of New South Wales, and the Victoria Cross winner in Syria and Lebanon. 2-6 Field Regiment, Royal Australian Artillery, from the 7th Division. And the PNG Volunteer Rifles we've just seen. They were formed very rapidly and were raised from local volunteers who used their local knowledge to assist the campaign. Papua New Guinea Infantry Battalions, the Jungle Fighters, they were of great assistance. Their local knowledge allowed them to achieve support to the rest of the Australian units by outthinking and outmanoeuvring the Japanese. The 7th Australian Division was a division that saw a lot of action. It not only saw action in the Middle East, but also in the Southwest Pacific and New Guinea. Section 102 Australian General Transport. We have to shout out to the transport. Transport gives an army its ability to move rapidly and be resupplied rapidly. And without the transport, we wouldn't be able to get around the battlefield as we're required to do. And here we have the 21st Brigade. This year marks 82 years since the Battle of Kokoda. Between July and November 1942, Australian forces fought to prevent the Japanese from reaching Port Moresby and then pushed them back over the Owen Stanley Range. About 56,000 Australians were at one time or another involved either in Papua or in sea or air operations up there. The 2nd Anti-Aircraft Regiment. The anti-aircraft regiments, both light and heavy, were incredibly important, providing the top cover not only to the army troops on the land, but also when the naval ships came into port, providing great protection against raids from above.
And here we have the Hawkesbury District Concert Band, which is a community-based band in Richmond, New South Wales. It's been in existence firstly as a brass band and later as a concert band since 1969. And the current Director of Music is Judy Gray. Band members range in age from 8 to over 70.
And here we have the 25 Australian Infantry Brigade AIF, who saw action not only in Palestine, Syria, Egypt, but also as a battle honour for England. 2nd 34th Australian Infantry Battalion. And the 2nd 33rd Australian Infantry Battalion. It's great to see the photos being carried by relatives of their veteran.
Here we've got the 6th Machine Gun Battalion and 7 Gun Machine Battalion led by John Campbell. This was formed in 1942 and they served up in New Guinea. Behind them, the 2nd, 3rd Field Workshops. Some might say that's back in the rear with the gear, but absolutely they're doing the repairing and recovering all our equipment to keep us fighting. And here comes the 8th Division of the Australian Infantry Force.
And the 8th Australian Division were known as the gallant ill-fated because of the terrible fate which befell its members. They were sent to defend Malaya and Singapore and other islands to the north, but in February 1942, but all units were overrun by the Japanese. Those who survived the fierce fighting spent the rest of the war as POWs, and as we know, in appalling conditions.
Out the front we can see the headquarters is represented, and they of course were directing the campaign in Malaya and Singapore, and we're based in Singapore until it fell into Japanese hands.
And the 2nd 15th Field Regiment fought in the major battles of the Malayan campaign, inflicting heavy losses on the Japanese, and after the surrender they spent 3.5 years in captivity in Changi, Burma, Thailand, Borneo, and some in Japan.
And here we have the King's School Cadet Corps Band. The King's School Cadet Corps is the oldest and one of the largest in Australia, involving 600 cadets.
And the 8th Division Signals Corps. Signals are vitally important. If you don't have communications, you cannot control a battlefield, you cannot manoeuvre your units, and you definitely can't get resupplied.
You do know how to fix the communications for a senior officer, don't you?
And importantly, we also see the engineers, and the engineers are the ones that keep us moving when we shouldn't be able to because of the obstacles. Second 18 Battalion, Australian AIF.
'18, 19 and 20 battalions were all sent to defend Malaya, and these brigades played a crucial role against the advancing Japanese army.
Yeah, those battalions did.
'20th Battalion there, led by Dennis Barker, and this is another distinguished battalion of the Malayan campaign. And they well and truly bore the brunt of the Japanese attack on Singapore the night before it fell in February in 1942. Great to see the families out there. It's a story that should not be lost.
And the 2nd 30th Battalion AIF is coming up now. They were formed on the 17th of October 1940 with Lieutenant Colonel F.G. Callaghan as commanding officer. And after training at Tamworth and Bathurst, the battalion went to Singapore and Malaya. '23 Brigade, the famous Sparrow Force of Timor. Second 12 Australian Field Ambulance. Field ambulances played such an important part in supporting our troops and keeping them alive.
And this is the shore. Oh,
Australian Infantry Battalion, 1939, 1945 in New Guinea. I think we've got a band coming up.
we do, sorry. So yeah, the Shaw Winona Cadet Band right after them, which was established in 1908. And honouring a rich Anzac tradition, so spanning multiple generations of cadets, a great many of whom have served in theatres of war and peacekeeping missions in pursuit of Australia's national interests. And indeed, Shaw Old Boys have served this great nation in all theatres of war, from the Boer War through to Afghanistan. The SCU Cadet Band has developed from humble beginnings as a small drum corps into the fine ensemble that you see today.
And here we have the 9th Australian Division. The T on the banner stands for Tobruk. These are the famous Rats of Tobruk. The division also fought in both battles of El Alamein and later in the campaign to liberate Borneo. They had many casualties throughout the war, over 12,000, about 1/4 of the men who served. And here we have the 2-3 Anti-Tank Regiment, AIF. The colour patch that it wears, you will see later on in the 23 Field Regiment, and that's because the 23 Field Regiment was created out of 2-3 Anti-Tank Regiment. The 2nd 4th Light Anti-Aircraft Regiment. All of these units carry the T badge after Tobruk. The badge was designed specifically for the 9th Division so that anybody could see that these were the famous Rats of Tobruk and they'd served there. The 26th Brigade was made up of the 2nd 23rd, the 2nd 24th and the 2nd 48th battalions. Today the battalions are marching as one group, and they're led by Jack McCabe. The brigade first saw action in the Western Desert in April 1941 and later fought at Benghazi, Tobruk and El Alamein. And eventually they also fought in New Guinea.
The 2nd Machine Gun Battalion, led by David Martin. This was a bit of an elite unit. It was raised in Sydney in the 1940s and played an important role in the Western Desert battles, fighting alongside the infantry, defending the Alamein line.
And here we have the 2nd 3rd Pioneer Battalion, led by Ron Kennedy. Formed out of Cowra in 1940, the unit was a combination of engineers and infantry. It was used as at both the battles of El Alamein and the fighting for Lae and Finschhafen in New Guinea. And there we have the infamous 2nd 43 Infantry Battalion, followed by the 30th Battalion AIF. The 5th Australian Field Company, Royal Australian Engineers. Interestingly there, you can see that they started serving in Western Australia, but ended up in New Guinea.
And here we have the Clan MacLeod Pipe Band, which has been piping in Sydney for over 75 years, having been formed in 1948 as the City of Mosman Pipe Band. And the Anzac March that year was their first public performance.
And here we have the 31st 51st Infantry Battalion. It's led by Terry Dwyer and served in Dutch New Guinea, Bougainville, Nauru and Rabaul. And the 53rd, the Mice of Moresby Battalion. The association was formed in 1956 from surviving veterans of the 53rd Battalion, 55th and the 55th 53rd Battalion. And today they're led by President Rob Denny. They were called the Mice of Moresby as a derogatory term used by Tokyo Rose to describe Australian units defending Port Moresby. These mice would be trapped in the holes, as she would say, but they found that a badge of honour because it's made them similar to the rats of Tobruk.
I work on the principle if the enemy gives you a nickname, you're starting to get under their skin.
here we have the 36th Australian Infantry Battalion, known as Ike's Marines after their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Ike Itchison. This battalion conducted an amphibious landing on the coast of New Britain in 1945 using captured Japanese barges. They were the last battalion to engage the Japanese on the ground in the jungles near the Marvello River of New Britain.
And coming up, the Sydney Boys High School Marching Band, which has been established for 21 years. And the band rehearse twice a week, comprised of students from years 7 to 12. And the school is building a tradition of service to the community through the marching band and cadet corps. And the drum major for 2024 is Michael Lee, who's a year 12 and school music prefect at Sydney Boys High School.
Getting lovely scenes from the sidelines there. Young and old, everyone's there. In fact, the crowds look like they're building. We're only halfway through the parade.
Well, definitely what we will start to see now is as we get the younger veterans, they'll have their families, instead of marching for them, standing by watching them march past. And here we have the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam and the 1st Australian Civil Affairs Unit. Australian Army Training Team Vietnam, famous unit. It is the only unit that had all of the VCs won during the Vietnam War in it. More than 1,000 men served over a 10-year period, including Kevin Dasher Wheatley, who was just up on our screen, and his mate Ron Butch Swanton, who died together in Vietnam in 1965. What is fantastic is that they were recently honoured posthumously with the Medal for Gallantry. There they are on our screen. Two wonderful Australians. A total of 33 of the Australian Army Training Team were killed in action, which is an enormous price and up there with the largest casualties for any unit for Vietnam. The team received over 100 individual awards, including, as I said earlier, those 4 Victoria Crosses. And here we have headquarters, the 1st Australian Task Force.
Okay, and here is the Air League band Moorebank, which was formed by the members from the Moorebank Squadron, and the band considers it a great privilege and an honour to participate in the Sydney Anzac Day March to support the veterans and the serving men and women of the Australian Defence Forces. Many of the band members take part in local dawn services before coming into town to join the march. And the band recently won the Australian Air League State Trophy for Best Band and also Drum Major, as well as Best Marching Band at the 2024 Tamworth Country Music Parade.
And we just saw the Royal Australian Armoured Corps Association banner. The first of the units coming through is the 1st Armoured Regiments Association, A, B and C squadrons. Formed in 1949, they operated Centurion tanks during the Vietnam War, and they had Leopard tanks, and more recently they have had the M1 Abrams. Significantly, the Centurion tanks during the Vietnam War were used to clear Viet Cong bunker systems and played critical roles in the battles of Coral Balmoral and Bin Ba.
And here we have the Hornsby RSL Pipe Band, which has been serving the community since 1961. And the band wears the McLean of Lochbuie from the Isle of Mull. And they perform at civic and charitable functions such as the Bundanoon Gathering of the Clans and Nelson Bay Highland Games. The band actually had 2 members tour with the combined RSL Pipe Band for the Anzac tour of Northern France in 2018 in support of the many commemorations marking the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II.
And here we have the A Battery Association. A Battery plays a special part and place in the Australian Army because it is the oldest unit of the Australian Army. It was formed in 1871. It first saw overseas service during the Sudan and was in South Africa during the Boer War. It was Gallipoli and the Western Front during World War I, New Guinea during World War II. And post-war, the battery saw service during the Malayan emergency, the Indonesian confrontation, and in Vietnam. Members of the 1st Regiment, Royal Australian Artillery. Made up of 101, 103 and 105 field batteries, and indeed A Battery is a part of the 1st Regiment today. They served throughout all of the theatres post World War II, Malayan emergency in Vietnam, and indeed members of the regiment have served more recently in Iraq and Afghanistan and in East Timor. The artillery has the motto Ubique, which means in Latin everywhere. And the reason it has that is wherever the army goes, members of the artillery will be there. .102 Coral Battery, famous as the battery that was at the Battle of Coral. The battery famously defended itself against a huge Vietnamese force. One of its guns was overrun, and then the battery took that gun back.
And this is the Epping RSL Golden Kangaroos Marching Band. And they're celebrating over 50 years of musical education and experiences. They welcome members of all ages and abilities. From absolute beginner to advanced, the Golden Kangaroos consist of 3 concert bands, a stage band, and our marching band. So each band performs regularly in concert and throughout the community, And today, the Golden Kangaroos Marching Band are led by Drum Major Joanna Druitt.
And there we have the 7th Field Regiment Royal Australian Artillery Association and the banner of the 3rd Division Artillery Australian Imperial Force marching together side by side. The 7th Field Regiment draws its lineage right back to the 7th Field Artillery Brigade of World War I. '18 Light Anti-Aircraft Association, Royal Australian Artillery. And here we have 23rd Field Regiment Association. This is the unit that I am a previous commanding officer of. As I said earlier, 23 Field Regiment was formed out of the 2nd, 3rd Anti-Tank Regiment of the 9th Division that took part in World War II.
Okay, and here we have the New South Wales Public Schools Millennium Marching Band, which their main focus is providing fun and entertainment. The ensemble includes students from years 7 to 12, and they rehearse one weekend a month. So the band was formed for the Sydney 2000 Olympics and is still going strong 24 years later, having developed into a group that focuses on parade marching, drill performances, and choreography performances.
They are super groovy to have on the parade today.
They are one of the highlights of the march every year.
I can tell you my daughter Iris will be loving it because they're wearing purple, their favourite colour.
I'm struggling to sit still in my chair.
I think if you go through the tapes, it's a different outfit from year to year, so it's fantastic to see them out there today.
Over 100 in that band. That is a massive effort. One rehearsal a month, did you say, Carla? I'm impressed.
And here we have the Royal Australian Engineers Association. The engineers, like artillery, has the motto Ubique, because just like the artillery, wherever the army goes, the engineers will be there. Today it's led by David Defale. The association has been active since the end of the Vietnam War and provides point of contact for support for retired and serving officers with an engineering background. There we have one field squadron, Royal Australian Engineers. You want to talk about battle honours? Look at those. And one field squadron, the Tunnel Rats, Royal Australian Engineers. The Tunnel Rats infamously earned their name from the work they did in the tunnels of Vietnam, clearing them through bunker systems, highly dangerous work. The men you see there are incredibly brave individuals, because often they would have to enter a dark tunnel not knowing what would be at the end of it. And here we have a little bear will fix it, if you remember that ad. Well, 17 construction squadron took that bear and they said a little bear will support you. The banner shows that symbol proud and clear. They served in South Vietnam from 66 to 71 across the Pacific nations during the 1980s, and Namibia as part of the United Nations peacekeeping operation, whereas the squadron was awarded the very first honour distinction for outstanding service in a non-war zone. The New South Wales Sappers Association, led by the President, Major Brian Malouf, who currently serves as a reservist in the Royal Australian Army Medical Corps. Sappers is an Army engineers term, and it goes back to the days of the Tunnel Rats, not the Tunnel Rats, I should say the Tunnelling Corps, or Tunnelling Battalions in World War I. If anybody who knows anything about mining, the tunnels that link up drives are called the saps. And so the sappers, being engineers, were the ones who dug them. And here we have 32 Small Ship Squadron, Royal Australian Engineers. The motto displayed on the association banner means never to be towed. This was the Army's Navy and operated ocean-going tank landing ships during the period 1959 to 1971. And here we have 21 Construction Regiment Association, led by Warrant Officer Class 1 Bob Smith, OAM retired. Construction regiments in the engineers are incredibly important because, of course, when you move into an operational zone, you need to build infrastructure. And it is the construction engineers that do that, whether that be roads, buildings, drainage, or water systems. These are the men and women who will do it for you. Indeed, they'll even build you an airfield if you want it.
And here we have the Hunter School of the Performing Arts Marching Band, which is one of Australia's leading marching bands with numerous credits to their name. And the band has performed all over the country, including the beautiful outback, as well as internationally, including Hong Kong, China, the USA, Canada. And once on parade, the band is led by a current senior musician as the drum major. And this is part of a program to develop leadership skills with their senior musicians. Today, the marching show band is under the command of drum major Mr. Ruben Junker.
And here we have the Australian Water Transport Association, led by Ken Solomons. He's a World War II veteran. He's 100 2 years old this coming June. The Army's Navy. And associations like this will start to come into their own more as we build the literal capability in the Australian Army. Royal Australian Survey Corps. Survey Corps, which was disbanded, is incredibly important because it was the surveyors who would allow us to ensure that all of the survey in a new environment was done correctly, which means that the maps were correct, and if the maps were correct, then your targeting and all your other associated geography is correct. And here we have the Royal Australian Signals Association. The banner today is being carried by 142 Signal Squadron based at Dundas and at Holsworthy, and shows the many areas of operations the Corps has been involved in since World War II. New South Wales signal units have links right back to the First and Second World Wars, as well as the Korean, Malayan and Vietnam conflicts. The Corps has done and always will do, and indeed today makes a significant contribution. If you can't communicate, you can't operate.
And this is the Homebush Boys Drum Corps, a percussion ensemble with membership that represents their diverse community. And for almost 2 decades, the Drum Corps has commemorated significant community events and represented the school and public boys education, including performing regularly at Anzac Day events in the CBD.
And here we have the Royal Australian Regiment Association. The Royal Australian Regiment with its famous Skippy badge. 1st Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment. It's important to note that the 1st Battalion was part of Interfet. And Interfet has its 25th year anniversary. The battalion's nickname is the Big Blue One. It saw service during the Korean War and the Malayan emergency, and was the first infantry battalion sent to Vietnam in 1965, and took part in the first battle that the Australians were in of Hobo Woods. Importantly, it was also commanded by our current Governor-General, General Hurley, who at the time as the CO took the battalion to Somalia. 2nd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment. Nickname and motto, second to none. Closely followed by Old Faithful, the 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. It's led today by Major Rod White, AM, Lieutenant Colonel Graham Kells, MC, and Lieutenant Colonel Nick Welsh, DSC. The Royal Australian Regiment battalions have seen active service in every operation that we have done since Korea all the way through to our present day operations. 4th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. The 4th Battalion saw service in Malaya, Borneo, and in Vietnam. It was also the battalion that the Commando Regiment, now known as 2 Commando Regiment, was formed out of until the battalion's colours were laid down when the 2nd Commando Regiment was raised. The Fighting 4th, as it is known. And the association is led today by David Morris. Incidentally, the 4th Battalion was the first Australian battalion raised on Australian soil. The 5th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment, the Tiger Battalion. This was the first Australian battalion with national servicemen in its ranks that saw action in Vietnam. And here we have 6th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment. Famous mostly for the Battle of Long Tan, but it has a proud tradition. Importantly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of my instructors from when I was an officer cadet, Corporal Buddy Lee, who was a section commander at Long Tan. And we think of Buddy today as we think of all our veterans, although he is now long gone. The 6th Battalion deployed twice to Vietnam. It has deployed twice to East Timor and conducted operations in the Solomons, Iraq and Afghanistan. And Corporal Daniel Kerrigan from Delta Company, as well as the Long Tan boys, earned his Victoria Cross for actions in Afghanistan. It was the first VC awarded to a member of the Royal Australian Regiment outside of Vietnam, and the first VC awarded to a member of the Royal Australian Regiment in total. And here we have the 8th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment. The battalion was raised in 1966 and initially served for 18 months in Malaysia as part of the peacekeeping force. It deployed to Vietnam in November 1969 and conducted successful patrols in the Long Hai area and received the Vietnamese Meritorious Unit Commendation, Cross of Gallantry with Palm for this service.
And here we have the St George and Sutherland Scottish Pipe Band, which were formed in 1946 by returned servicemen after World War II. And the band have participated in Anzac Day and Remembrance Day commemorations for more than 75 years.
And here we have the 9th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment. It has the large brown 9 RAR banner. It deployed to Vietnam for 12 months from November 1968 and spent 80% of its time on operations. Former Governor-General Sir Peter Cosgrove was awarded the Military Cross while serving with the battalion in Vietnam. And he is there on screen right now, marching with the battalion in its ranks, as he always does. Probably right next to members of his own platoon. The 8th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment and 9 Battalion Royal Australian Regiment are now combined as the 8th 9 Royal Australian Regiment, based in Brisbane. And here we have the 2-4 RAR Association. Like the amalgamation of 8-9 Royal Australian Regiment, 2-4 was a combination of the 2nd and the 4th Battalions. It was formed in 1973 and the battalions were linked and served at Rifle Company Butterworth, and is Australia's longest deployment and is still going, Rifle Company Butterworth, where it was initially formed. And there we have the banner of Special Z Force. Special Z Force is an important unit because it was the first Special Forces unit formed in the Australian Army. Indeed, Special Z Force is the special force that today's Special Forces units found its genesis. Directly behind them is the Special Air Service Association. Special Air Service Association in Australia makes up members who were part of the Special Air Service Company before it became a regiment. And then we have the 1st Commando Association. 1st Commando Regiment Association, I should say. Their hat badge shows the commando dagger, the boomerang, with the motto, "Strike swiftly." And here we have 161 Reconnaissance Squadron, Australian Army Aviation. The reconnaissance squadrons played an important part, particularly during Vietnam, of providing intelligence and aerial observation of targets on the ground and movements. The Australian Intelligence Corps Association, led by Colonel Mike Peters. This association has participated in every Anzac Day march since 1946. There's somebody enjoying the band.
Well, how could you not? It's pipes and drums from the Salvation Army Brass Band. Here every year and continue to provide fantastic musical support and service to the parade.
And here we have the Royal Australian Corps of Transport Association. The RACT Association is celebrating its 50th anniversary in the last year, and this is the last of its 50th anniversary celebrations. The head of Corps, Brigadier Natasha Ludwig, is participating in the contingent, and also participating is the Colonel Commandant East of the RACT, Colonel Mike Miller, LVO RFD. Major ROE, the president of the association, carries the walking stick of his father, Major General K.C. Ether, carried into battle at Bardia in New Guinea. Here we have the Field Ambulance Associations. Field Ambulance Associations represent all of the field ambulances and their units that provide the integral medical support in the field to the troops. Immediate support that is necessary to maintaining the lives of the individuals who are in combat.
Just before we do this, I just want to clear up the previous pipe band. That was the LCC Southern Cross Pipes and Drums. Thank you for your service today. This way, here we have the Christian Brothers High School Band. Another bunch of fine young musicians taking us forward. Good to see all these school bands out here today. They bring light and colour.
And here we have the Royal Australian Army Ordnance Corps Association. The motto, "To the warrior his arms," and it couldn't be truer. The Ordnance Corps is responsible for administering and supplying all kinds of stores, equipment, weapons and ammunition to the troops. From the local units to those who serve in operational areas overseas. Originally established by General Edward Hutton, the first Chief of the Army after Federation. And the Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, RAME, led by Lieutenant Colonel Kerry Tunbridge. The RAME formed in 1942 from the Ordnance Corps and the Service Corps, and was granted the title Royal by King George VI in 1948 in response to their dedicated performance during World War II. They are the fixers of the Army. And here we have just seen the Royal Australian Legal Corps, quickly followed by the Royal Australian Corps of Military Police. Previously known as Provost, they are another unit celebrating 100 years of service, having been formed in 1916. They have served in every major conflict since World War II, Korea, Malaya and Vietnam. And there they have the Royal Australian Army Nursing Corps Association. The nurses today are led by Nurse Major Sarah Winter, former officer commanding of Delta Company, 2nd Health Battalion and 2nd Health Brigade. The red jackets and grey trousers that you see some wearing symbolise the traditional grey dresses and scarlet capes worn by nurses up until the end of the Vietnam War. Australian Army nurses have served continuously since the Boer War and are still accompanying Australian troops wherever they are deployed, either in Australia or overseas. And an interesting fact, male nurses were first appointed in 1972. Here we have the Women's Royal Australian Army Corps, led by Gay Hutchison. These wonderful women are the predecessors to what we now have is women in all branches, arms and services of the Australian Army. It was established in 1951 and continued for 34 years until 1985, when, as I said, women were fully integrated into the Army.
And right here, the Trinity Grammar School Marching Band, which has been in existence since 1952. And they support the RSL branches in and around the inner west of Sydney by supplying any members of the band or the whole band when requested. And the band has a really solid schedule of performances and competitions throughout the year. They go to sporting events, open days and competitions, and the band also doubles as the school's symphonic wind ensemble, the premier music ensemble at Trinity, and perform at the annual Trinity Music Gala.
And here we have the Officer Training Unit Association. It was established in 1965 as part of the National Service Program. It was based at Skyville, where national servicemen who had been chosen to become officers did their training. It was a grueling 24-week course. It was designed primarily to produce infantry platoon commanders, although they sent graduates to every arm and services. Many of these men served in South Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, Malaysia and Singapore. And during the 8 years of its existence, over 1,800 graduated as second lieutenants, and tragically 8 were killed in action in Vietnam. The Association of the 4th Infantry Battalions, led by Warrant Officer Class 1 Warren Barnes, as they march across our screen now. The Association of the 17th Infantry Battalions, Formed as a part of the 1st AAF in 1915 and served at Gallipoli in the Western Front, the battalion's history that went through all the way through to the now linked 2nd and 17th Battalion of the Royal New South Wales Regiment has a long and distinguished history, including Alpha Company that sits in the 2nd 17th Battalion, which is the Scottish Company. And here we see its forebear, the New South Wales Scottish Regimental Association. The Catering Corps. An army marches on its stomach, Napoleon said, and nothing could be truer. The Catering Corps has been providing wonderful meals, although I say that they can only make with what they've got, and I can tell you they've turned many a tin of spam into something delicious.
And here we have the Scots College Old Boys Pipe Band, and which was formed and had its first appearance as part of the 1993 centenary celebrations of the Scots College. Old boy pipers and drummers, numbering in the hundreds, descended upon the college for a gathering to mark the occasion. And the band's first Sydney Anzac Day march was in 1996, and it's been in attendance every year since.
And here we have the National Servicemen's Association of Australia and its affiliates. Known as the Nashos, this contingent represents 2 periods of national service. The earliest period, which was during the 1950s, which saw over 200,000 18-year-olds entering 3 branches of the armed forces. They were stationed at centres all over the country. The second period lasted from 1965 until 1972. In the second period, men turning 20 had to register for the birthday ballot. And those whose birth dates were selected were required for 2 years military service in the army and liable to be sent overseas for combat duty. Some 64,000 men were called up, with 15,000 sent to Vietnam. And others served in Malaysia, Borneo, Papua New Guinea and here in Australia. Over 200 national servicemen were killed in action in Vietnam.
Got to be proud of the Nashos. My dad was a Nasho.
Yeah, we're definitely proud of them. We're proud of all of them.
And here we have the 344 Musicians Flight Australian Air Force Cadets, also known as the 3-Wing Band, which was formed in 2015 to support the 75th anniversary celebrations of the Australian Air Force Cadets. And since its inception, the band has grown to be the largest band within the Australian Defence Force Cadets, based at nearby RAAF base Richmond. The band currently has 50 members, made up from cadets and staff from across New South Wales and the ACT.
I've been listening to them practice out at RAF Base Richmond all week, so it's fantastic to see them on the march today. Behind the band is the number 22 Squadron, City of Sydney Squadron, formed at RAF Base Richmond in 1936. Actually, just in front of 22 is Air Commander Australia, Air Vice Marshal Glenn Braz with Warrant Officer Steve Weaver. And we can see one of the military working dogs from 22 Squadron out at RAF Base Richmond, probably a Belgian Malinois. Warrant Officer Stephen Weaver, the Air Command Warrant Officer there on screen. His daughter, Akisha, is marching with the Air Command contingent further down the back. Members of Number 22 Squadron provide airbase operations service at RAF Base Richmond, including air movements, firefighting, and a host of other expeditionary airfield services at the base. It's got a long, proud history. It was originally formed as a reserve squadron at RAF Base Richmond, deployed to New Guinea with Boston bombers and later Beaufighters, with one of its members, Flight Lieutenant Bill Newton, receiving the Victoria Cross for his service. Tragically, he was killed during the war. You can see there the banner of the Australian Flying Corps, as Army is fond of reminding us the Australian Air Force was born from the Australian Flying Corps during the First World War. World War I AAFC banner proudly represents the old and bold, the 4 squadrons of the Australian Flying Corps, who were formed in 1916, almost 110 years ago, many of which still continue to this day. I can see there the Women's Royal Australian Air Force contingent being led by Margaret Welsh, and a shout out to Del Gaudry CSC, who sadly cannot lead the contingent today as she normally does. The Women's Auxiliary Australian Air Force was the first and largest of the 3 women's services during the war, with over 27,000 passing through its ranks. They made up 30% of the ground staff, becoming electricians, mechanics, radar and telegraph operators, and truck drivers. I think that might be the Corrective Services Band coming back around again. We can see here the Royal Australian Air Force Association RAF Reservists. For the longest time, reserves in Sydney were held within 22 Squadron at RAF Base Richmond, but now serve throughout a variety of units and squadrons throughout Australia, including myself. You can see there some Australian Air Force cadets and some veteran members as well. Behind the cadets are the members of Headquarters Air Command up at RAF Base Glenbrook, formerly the site of the Lapstone Hill Hotel next to the Great Western Highway. Leading them today is their commanding officer, Wing Commander Ivan Benitez Aguirre. Headquarters Air Command is responsible for management and support to the force element groups of the Royal Australian Air Force around the country, helping raise, train and sustain the capability that we provide. Behind Air Command, arguably one of the hardest working squadrons in the Royal Australian Air Force. It's number 37 Squadron, which flies the C-130 Hercules out at RAF Base Richmond. We can see there their past members and their association being led by Flight Lieutenant Al Harris, who was I believe, a loadmaster with the squadron, and one of the members who participated in the support to Cyclone Tracy 50 years ago. Today, the squadron still flies the C-130 Hercules from RAF Base Richmond, providing air mobility and support to the Australian Defence Force, as well as a critical role in any number of peacekeeping and disaster relief operations around the world. Most recently, they've been involved in evacuation of communities threatened by floods throughout Northern Australia, including Northern Territory. If you were watching from throughout New South Wales, you might have seen one of their Hercules conduct a fly past of your Anzac service this morning. The RAF National Service Association and its veterans, the threat of the Cold War in the 1950s led to the Australian National Service Scheme in 1951, including national service within the Royal Australian Air Force. The RAF National Service Scheme saw more than 20,000 members serve over a 6-year program.
And this is the Salvation Army Brass Band. And Salvation Army bands have a long history in Australia, with the first being established in 1881 in Adelaide, South Australia. So by the late 1990s, Australia had 200 senior and 130 junior Salvation Army brass bands. And the brass band is made up of salvos from Salvation Army brass bands all around Sydney. And the Salvation Army, or the Sally Man as it's affectionately called by those within the Defence Services, serve troops by providing a Christian-based ministry of service in practical, emotional and moral terms, supporting those on base, in the field and overseas.
And that is exceptional timing from the Historic Aircraft Restoration Society with 2 of their Dakotas, 1 of their Caribou and a tracker conducting a fly past of Sydney just now as the RAF Vietnam Veterans Association. The timing is right because 60 years ago this year, the first RAF aircraft and crews were deployed to Vietnam with the RAF Transport Flight Vietnam and their Caribous. Members today are being led by Graham Christian and also include members of 9 Squadron, which flew the Iroquois helicopter and was recently re-established within the Permanent Air Force. They're also joined by number 1 Operational Support Unit members and number 2 Squadron, which operated to Canberra, and detachments from number 36 Squadron and 37 Squadron, which flew the Hercules to Vietnam. Number 3 Squadron, a unit with a very strong connection to Sydney through its operations from Richmond from 1925 to 1940 rather, when it deployed on action to the Second World War, serving throughout the Middle East and into North Africa and Italy. It was one of the most successful squadrons within that theatre during the war. Subsequent to them, 3 Squadron has served in Malaysia, but spent much of its time at RAF Base Williamtown, where it continues to serve today. There he is, Bruce Robertson of Number 30 Squadron Association, who I believe is 102 this year. I might have to get that checked. Bruce Robertson was a wireless operator who actually listened to the Morse code signals from the Japanese submarine attack in Sydney Harbour in 1941 rather. He later went on to New Guinea to serve with Number 30 Squadron as a wireless operator, listening to the Battle of the Bismarck Sea as it played out with Australian, American against Japanese convoys. Number 31 Squadron, like 30 Squadron, also flew the Beaufighter, but largely from Coomaley Creek in Northern Territory. They conducted long-range patrol missions and attack missions against Japanese bases throughout East Timor and the Dutch East Indies. It was incredibly dangerous work. The Beaufighter was a very capable aircraft, but flew at considerable risk of attack from Japanese fighter aircraft in that theatre. And those Dakotas would have been a welcome sound for many Australians on deployment during the war, as well as subsequent years since the war. And we can see there the banner of the Spitfire Association, and I'm going to have a sharp eye out for, that's him, Jock Castles. Jock served with, funnily enough, the Royal Australian Air Force during the Vietnam War, flying Caribous. Prior to this, he served with the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. He learned to fly Spitfires from Neville Duke, a famous ace pilot with the Royal Air Force, and later became a test pilot. Jock, unfortunately, was shot down by a Focke-Wulf in Italy, over Italy in 1944, and spent the remainder of the war within the Stalag Luft 3 prison camp.
And here we have the Sydney Thistle Highland Pipe Band, which is a long-established pipe band in Sydney, formed in 1918 at the conclusion of World War I, and first participated in the Anzac Day March held that year. They regularly compete in pipe band competitions and have held both state and national titles over multiple years and provide extensive service to the community, including festivals, street parades, sporting events, many other private engagements. And the band wears the Farquharson tartan as part of both a traditional full-dress Highland regimental uniform and a modern-style Scottish walking-out dress.
The band is being joined by an encore performance from the Caribou Dakota and the tracker overhead. Behind the band, we can see number 75 squadron, which marches in the Sydney Anzac Day March every year. However, the squadron today is actually based at RAF Base Tyndall near Katherine in the Northern Territory. It's a squadron with an incredibly proud history of service. They were formed and immediately deployed in 1942 to Port Moresby for the defence of Port Moresby against Japanese air raids. Later served in Milne Bay and other battles throughout the Pacific. Following them are number 77 Squadron, based at RAF Base Williamtown and led today by Wing Commander Paul Simmons. 77 likewise served during the Second World War, but perhaps best known for its service during the Korean War. The squadron was part of the British Commonwealth Occupation Force in Japan, from where it conducted operations over Korea with the Mustang and later re-equipped with the Meteor jet fighter. Up there is RAF Ubon Thailand 79 Squadron. Many might not be aware that the RAF had a squadron of Sabre fighters in Thailand throughout the Vietnam War. However, they did not serve on offensive operations. They served as a air defence squadron. A little known fact too that they provided air defence training with American Phantom jets during that war. The veterans and families and relatives of the Bomber Command Association. This association is made up of those who served in RAF Bomber Command during World War II, along with their family members or members who have an interest in Bomber Command. See there, 455 Squadron, that's it. Originally flew Hampden light bombers before re-rolling to the Beaufighter, but they were deployed to England, to the European campaign rather, where they provided support to RAF Coastal Command. They were responsible for attacking German shipping throughout the English Channel and North Sea, which included preventing any German fast boat attacks during the D-Day landings 80 years ago. 460 Squadron just coming into frame there was one of our Lancaster bomber squadrons as part of Bomber Command during the Second World War. They're being led today by Wing Commander Dave Brown, I believe, who is the commanding officer of the current 460 Squadron from Canberra. Flying bombers over the European theatre of World War II, 460 Squadron suffered a brutal toll during the war, the heaviest of any squadron in the RAF. 458 squadron with Wellington bombers served throughout the Mediterranean theatre of World War II, I believe.
For the observant amongst you, you would have noticed our RAF colleagues are now sporting beards. And this is a change in uniform policy which happened in readiness for this year's, and I see that they're embracing it with gusto.
I'm always very excited to see someone with a beard in the Air Force. It's like I'm meeting them again for the first time.
We don't need beards. Tougher than that.
Good one. 466 and 462 Squadrons RAF, also part of Bomber Command throughout the Second World War. These were heavy bomber squadrons that also flew Halifaxes from Yorkshire, attacking targets in Germany and occupied Europe. Some of these squadrons also had a very interesting role in performing special duties, such as the jamming of German radar defence networks, or providing other support that would allow large formations of bombers to conduct their attacks against their targets. RAF Sunderland Squadron Associations, 10 Squadron and 461 Squadron. 10 Squadron was formed at RAF Base Point Cook and went to England in July of 1939 to pick up some Sunderland flying boats to bring back to Australia. Whilst they were there, war was declared in Europe and the squadron would remain in England with RAF Coastal Command for the next 6 years. During their
And right here we have the Castle Hill RSL Youth Band coming around for a second time.
His legs aren't getting tired, he's all smiles.
He's even having a dance. Good on him.
That is a fantastic energy being brought to the RAF contingent. Behind them are the Catalina Squadron Associations, the Black Cats. Throughout the war in the Pacific, Australian crews flying Catalina flying boats conducted reconnaissance missions against Japanese shipping, as well as a number of attacks to harass and deter their ships from throughout the Pacific. It was a Catalina that first spotted the approaching Japanese fleet in the Coral Sea, giving advance warning to the US fleet. The Cats flew night bombing raids, mined enemy harbours, performed reconnaissance and rescue missions, and dropped agents behind enemy lines. Skippy Squadron, members of civilian aircrew and members of Qantas who were part of official military transport duties throughout the Vietnam War. More than 600 Boeing 707 military charters were flown during the Vietnam War to carry Australian servicemen to that conflict and bring them home.
Importantly in that, a lot of the Special Air Service squadrons will tell you the only communications they could get sometimes were with the Skippy Squadron aircraft to get a message through that was important.
RAF signals, like our other services, we can't go anywhere without communications, and as they tell us, no comms, no bombs. current capabilities provided by number 1 Combat Communications Squadron, which is headquartered at Rough Base Amberley, with a number of detachments around the country. And here we see veterans of the Royal Air Force Association, which marked its centenary in 2018, and is the oldest independent air force in the world.
And here we have the Holroyd Brass Band, which has been a fixture of the Sydney Brass Band world for over 50 years. And they're the only A-grade band based in Western Sydney. And they can be seen out and about in the community all year round at concerts, community events, Christmas parades, and of course on Anzac Day.
The Parachute Regiment Association of New South Wales. Parachute Regiment Association incorporates the British Paras who are now resident in Australia. And for those that know, the Parachute Regiments had a close association, or still have a close association, with the 3rd Battalion Royal Australian Regiment, because Old Faithful was our Parachute Regiment. The British Paras still engage in conflicts and are on a constant 72-hour standby to be deployed to any potential trouble spots around the world. And this year marks the 80th anniversary for the Battle of Arnhem Bridge. We all know that as a bridge too far. And now we have the Combined British Forces Association. The Combined British Forces Association comprises British veterans from all services and Australians who have served in the British units that now call Australia home. The main focus is on remembrance of those that have died in service for their country. And while mainly Army, they have representatives from the Navy, Air Force and Merchant Marine. The Brigade of the Gurkhas, the mighty Gurkhas. They're a warrior nation, and they originate from the foothills of the Himalayas in Nepal. The Gurkhas are well known for their bravery and their fortitude. 4 Gurkha battalions fought alongside the Anzacs in the battles of Gallipoli. Since then, the Gurkhas have shared a close and mutually respectful friendship with the Anzacs and have fought many battles together with us around the world in many theatres. In 2009, the British government announced that all Gurkha veterans who had retired before 1997 with at least 4 years service would be allowed to settle in the United Kingdom, and so they should be. They're famous for their kukri, the curved knife. And if you take it out of its scabbard, you must draw blood before you put it back in. Here we have the Cyprus Regiment. The volunteers are mainly from the Greek Cypriot Islands, but there were also some Turkish Cypriots, Armenians, Maronites, and Latin and other Commonwealth nationalities. The Cyprus Regiment included infantry, mechanical transport and pack transport companies. Cypriot mule drivers were the first colonial troops sent to the Western Front. About 30,000 Cypriots served in the Cyprus Regiment in France, Ethiopia, Palestine and Italy, carrying equipment to all areas inaccessible to vehicles. They were also used to supply and support other troops at Monte Cassino.
And here we have, for the second time around, the Northern Suburbs Pipe Band.
And here we have the Fiji Ex-Servicemen and Women's Association, Sydney. Fijian soldiers have served with Australian troops in the Solomon Islands during World War II, in the jungles of Malaya during the emergency, and recently in East Timor, Bougainville and Afghanistan. We also have a very close association with them in training and bilateral participation.
They're being led by a squadron leader, Apelli, who's a current serving member from out at RAF Base Regiment there.
Here we have the Indian Defence Force Veterans for New South Wales, led by Joe Matthews. Around 15,000 Indian troops and non-combatants served at Gallipoli, fighting alongside our own Anzacs. There were 2 mountain artillery batteries that landed at Anzac Cove on the 25th of April, and they stayed there right up until the final evacuation. Nearly 1,500 Indians sacrificed their lives, and over 3,000 were battle casualties in the campaign. We continue to serve closely alongside our Indian friends from across the ocean, both in the air, the sea and the shore. And we just saw the passing of the Hong Kong Regiment, led by Patrick Chung. There was a volunteer force, and they saw active service during the defence of Hong Kong in World War II, and they were awarded the Battle of Honour of Hong Kong in 1957.
And here is the Maltese Concert Band, formerly known as Our Lady Queen of Peace Maltese Band, which was established in 1976. They're based in the Sydney's western suburbs. And this band is the first Maltese concert band in Australia and also the only one in New South Wales. So bringing a 150-plus year tradition of Maltese concert bands to Australia. And since last January, the band is directed by Charles Semiana. And it performs across the year in numerous festivals and concerts, particularly within the Maltese community.
And right behind them is the Maltese Ex-Servicemen's Association RSL sub-branch, led by the president, Clint Marlborough. This sub-branch has been marching on Anzac Day for more than 50 years, and we know Malta played a really important role in the Second World War, owing to its closeness to the shipping lanes. In fact, 2 Maltese men served on HMAS Sydney, which sank with all lives lost off the west coast. The bravery of the Maltese people during the Siege of Malta moved King George VI to award the George Cross Medal to Malta on a collective basis to bear witness to the heroism and devotion that will long be famous in history. Thank you, Malta, for your service.
And I believe behind the Maltese contingent is the Rhodesian Ex-Services Association, led by Rick Dabrowski. The Rhodesian Regiment was formed in 1898 and served alongside Australian troops in the Boer War. They took part in the relief of Mafeking and the epic siege of Elands River Post. During the Second World War, the Rhodesian Armed Forces served in many British units and supplied 3 squadrons to the Royal Air Force. In 1951, they saw service with the Commonwealth troops in Malaya, and in 1952, they supplied troops for the service in the Suez Canal zone. Behind the Rhodesian ex-servicemen are the National Sikh Council of Australia, including marching for Sikh regiments for World War I and II. They're led today by Colonel Charanjit Singh Chima, retired. During the First World War, Sikh regiments served at the Western Front, Gallipoli, Middle East and Mesopotamia. During the Third Battle of Krithia at Gallipoli, the 14th Sikh Battalion lost more than half its numbers killed or wounded in a matter of hours. During the Second World War, Sikhs fought in the North African Campaign and Italy, as well as many other areas across the Asian continent. Last year, the Sikh community dedicated a Sikh Anzac War Memorial and installed a statue of an unknown Sikh soldier at Glenwood to mark the historic contribution.
And here we have the South African Military Veterans Association of Australia. South Africans have fought alongside Australians in 4 major conflicts in the 20th century, including both World Wars and the Korean War. Veterans marching today represent all 4 arms of the Defence Force: Army, Air Force, Navy and the medical services. The current South African Defence Force is actively involved in peacekeeping and anti-piracy efforts in Central Africa.
Fantastic to see these crowds are staying on with the march as it progresses throughout the morning.
Well, why wouldn't they? It's a fantastic display, and it's fantastic to see the multicultural face of Australia, with all of the nations now putting their veterans forward. And it shows you what a wonderful thing Anzac Day is, and why it is a great march for peace.
And here we have the Sydney Tongan Adventist Brass Band, which was formed in 1990. And it's been involved in Anzac Day parades in Camden, New South Wales, Anzac Day marches in Sydney and Camden, church programs, as well as Camden City Council programs, the Lions Club programs, and many private programs like birthdays, weddings and funerals. And the band is based in Leppington, New South Wales.
Following on from the Sydney Tongan Seventh-day Adventist Band is the Tonga Ex-Servicemen Association Sydney branch. This is an association which came into being at the start of 2019, so a recent newcomer to the march. Units consist of men who served in the Solomon Islands and Ramsey, and ex-servicemen from His Majesty Armed Forces Tonga, representing members who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Also included are 52 volunteers fighting with the Maori Battalion in Egypt, Palestine on the Western Front during World War I, and the Second World War, 2,000 Tongans fought in the Solomon Islands campaign.
here we have the entertainers and war correspondents. The lead of the group is Mark Lanley. The Force's entertainment includes civilian entertainers, comedians, singers, bands and personalities from all around the entertainment industry within Australia. And they've gone into operational areas including Vietnam, Solomons, Timor-Leste, and all across the Middle East. The association was started by a small group of Vietnam entertainers, and they now invite other entertainers who have been to other theatres of war entertaining our troops to join them. And I certainly have been a beneficiary of having Kylie, Johnny Farnham, Killing, Hiding, Living End, all coming over and seeing us when we're over in Timor.
And there's little Paddy Amphlett. She was there singing as the Battle of Long Tan began.
Also with the Forces Entertainment are the Australian War Correspondents and Military Public Affairs Association, led by Lieutenant Colonel Bill Pickering, retired. Australian War Correspondents and Military Public Affairs Officers Association was formed after the Second World War and includes journalists, photographers and videographers who have covered wars in a civilian or military capacity. The motto of the association is "We go so you know."
And we also see Shaw Winona Cadet Band going around for a second time there.
And welcome to Sydney Legacy and the War Widows Guild. Legacy is unique to Australia, and it's born out of the trenches of World War I, where a promise was made to a dying mate to look after the missus and the kids. And today, Legacy serves around 43,000 partners and 1,800 children and dependents throughout Australia who have been left without their loved ones. And in fact, you see legatee children speaking at many of our key events. And with them is the War Widows Guild, which also dates back to the Second World War, and its values are underpinned with the mantra, "War Widows helping war widows." The Guild grew to become a national organisation and is highly respected by government leaders who seek consultation from the Guild's leaders regarding the needs and the challenges that war widows and widowers and their families face, and the systemic challenges that may be faced when they require those needs.
And here we have the descendants of Allied veterans. The Descendants of Veterans organisation was formed in 2007, so to provide a place for descendants to march in honour of veterans who bravely fought for their country. The group accommodates descendants of veterans from World War II and all conflicts since, and is led today by President Jeffrey Richards. Here we have the 9th Australian Field Ambulance, AIF, New Guinea. The 9th Australian Field Ambulance, like all the field ambulances that we have seen today, provide that immediate triage and care of the battle casualties. They're an essential part of any force, and the service that they have given has always been integral to our force's survival. And there we have the signallers from the 9th Division. They have the proud T symbol, as you can see, so they are rats at Tobruk. And whilst they may not have been able to march with the rest of the 9th Division, they are definitely not forgotten today, and it's great to see them out there. And the Darwin Infantry Battalion, the 19th Australian Infantry Battalion, AIF. A proud battalion formed out of Darwin. It saw active service in Darwin and then obviously in New Guinea. And in the Southwest Pacific. Well, that is an outstanding marching style, and I think we might have to incorporate that into the drill manual.
Yes, and we also have Marist College, Catholic College North Shore Marching Band, who have been marching regularly for over 20 years. And each year the band undertakes a rural New South Wales tour with many performances. And the music tuition program in the college encourages students to enter the AMEB and Trinity examinations, as well as the annual College of Stedford.
We're continuing to see the descendants of veterans from across all battalions and areas.
I can make out in the background there the US Army Small Ships Association, led by Neil Sandery, descendant of veteran Neil Sandery by the same name. The US Army Small Ships Section in 1942 to 1947 was a unique organisation formed in response to advancing Japanese forces in the South Pacific during the war. In 1942, the Small Ships Section commenced landings in New Guinea. This attack fleet consisted of a wide variety of vessels acquired or built in Australia and New Zealand that included trawlers, schooners, ketches, luggers, tugboats, yachts and ferries. The Small Ships Section employed over 3,000 Australian civilians, including one woman.
And here we have Knox Grammar School Pipe and Drums Band. It's located in Wahroonga on Sydney's North Shore. It's a uniting church school for boys, which was founded in 1924, so in the tradition of John Knox, a Scottish 16th century reformer. And the band was established in 1946 with a group of 9 boys, 4 sets of bagpipes. And they play at commemorative events and participate in competitions across Australia and the world. They've also taken part in the Anzac, the Sydney Anzac City March since its inception in 1966.
TOC H, New South Wales, led by Mark Greenacre. The flag bearers are the cadets from the Shore Cadet Unit in North Sydney, which has a 115-year tradition of cadets. And here we have the war widows and the families of the veterans. And it's great to see families rushing out to unite with one another, join together, and continue to build the ranks as we remember and honour.
And here we have the 2nd 5th Australian General Hospital. Now, the difference between a general hospital and a field hospital is important, because the field hospital is where they do the initial triage and care to the battle casualty, but the general hospital is where they conduct the major operations, surgery, and the longer-term care of the casualties. It's great to see them out there marching today, and that we remember the importance of all of those supporting efforts that provide the combat arms with the ability to fight.
I think that's the Hawkesbury District Council band, concert band coming for its second pass.
Yes, so the Hawkesbury District Concert Band is a community-based band in Richmond, New South Wales. They've been in existence firstly as a brass band and later as a concert band since 1969. And the current Director of Music is Judy Gray, and band members range in age from 8 to over 70. And the band consists of a training band, a senior band and stage band, and they march in various parades, fetes, the Hawkesbury Show as well, Anzac marches, and they also hold 2 to 3 of their own concerts yearly.
And here we have the American Legion, Post 1, Yanks Down Under. The American Legion is similar to the RSL, and Post is the same as a sub-branch. There are over 17,000 posts worldwide, with 2 in Australia. The post recognises Australian US veterans and those Australians who had served with the US Army, small ship detachment, the US Navy. Almost 1 million American service personnel passed through the country during World War II. They were much better paid than Australians and earned a reputation as big spenders. Since then, Americans and Australians have served alongside each other in Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq and Afghanistan, and indeed to this day the United States is our closest ally. One of our closest allies, I should say. We've got lots of close allies.
Descendants of Chinese veterans World War II, led by their founder, Jing Shengmeng. Descendants of Chinese veterans of World War II is a civil society formed by descendants of Chinese soldiers who fought against Imperial Japan during the war in China. Founded in 2015, the group has been participating in Anzac Day marches ever since. Prior to them, we would have also seen the Australian Chinese Ex-Services Association, which recognises the service of Australians of Chinese descent. They were led by the grandson of their founder. I believe his name was Pilot Officer Thomas Jong.
And here coming around for a second time is the Clan MacLeod Pipe Band. So they've been piping in Sydney for over 75 years. They formed in 1948 as the City of Mosman Pipe Band. And the Anzac March that year was their first public performance. And actually, following the closing of Mosman Scottish Society and a visit to Australia of the chief Clan MacLeod, Dame Laura MacLeod, in 1963, the band was granted the right to use the MacLeod name and to also wear the ancient tartan, which you see here today.
And here we have the French War Veterans Association of New South Wales, led by Philippe Manoli. Now, this contingent is made up of veterans and descendants from the Free French Forces in World War II and many of the post-war conflicts. There's also veterans here from many peacekeeping missions throughout the world.
And following behind them, we have the Greek Return Services League of New South Wales, led by Peter Tsigounis. Many Greek Australians have served in the Australian Defence Force, including nearly 90 who were at Gallipoli and the Western Front during World War I. In the battles of Greece and Crete in 1941 saw Australian soldiers fight alongside the local population against the invading German army. Many Greek and Cretan families often took fatal risks to shelter Australian soldiers from the Germans after they occupied the country. And closely following behind them is the United Irish Ex-Services Association of Australia, led by Belfast-born Patrick Armstrong of the Royal Ulster Rifles. It's open to any person who served in any Allied military force and also their descendants of Irish descendancy. Their banner has a map of Ireland with the 4 provinces in each corner and 94 battles, sieges and countries in which Irish veterans have served, going back hundreds of years, including Gallipoli, where Irish regiments fought alongside Australia. And here we have the Korean Return Services Association. This unit consists of veterans from the Korean War veterans, the Korean Vietnam veterans, and the Korean Marine Corps Association who have settled here in Australia. The Korean War Veterans Association has a membership of well over 4.5 million worldwide, and its aim is to honour and perpetuate the memory of those who gave their lives in the Korean War and to maintain and develop links and comradeship between all the veterans of the Korean War. Importantly, Korean soldiers also fought alongside Australians during the Vietnam War.
Behind Korea, we have the Polish Ex-Services Association, led by their president, Zach. I have a bit of a soft spot here. I have an uncle who served in the Pole Army. But this is the Sydney sub-branch of the Polish Ex-Servicemen's Association, and it was established in 1950, and they march in honour of those who fought for an independent Poland in World War II. Point to note that the Polish fighter pilots contributed greatly to the Battle of Britain, and there were 16 Polish squadrons in the Royal Air Force. Polish ground troops were at the siege of Tobruk, Monte Cassino, and the D-Day landings, and the Battle of Berlin. And the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 saw Polish resistance troops fight the Nazis for 63 days with little outside support. Thank you, Poland. Good to have you here today.
And following them is the Riverwood Hornets Australian Cadet Corps. They've been around before.
Right behind the band, we have the Serbian Veterans and Descendants Association, led by 100-year-old Sofia. And help me out here, I will do my very best. Sofia Jurkalo Zhetnik. She was a nurse and a courier from the Zhetnik Brigade. The Serbian people were among the first to form resistance against the Nazis in occupied Europe during the World War II. And they often fought as guerrilla forces behind the enemy lines, and they provided safe evacuation for many Allied airmen who'd been shot down over Europe. That was Sophia there, and she's not 100. She's a sprightly 101.
That's amazing. And here we have the Turkish veterans, led by Mehmet Evin. Today is an important day for both Australians and Turkish people. In spite of the fierce fighting that occurred at Gallipoli, Australian and Turkish soldiers developed a mutual respect for each other. In the post-war period, many Turks settled in Australia. Turkish troops fought alongside Australians in the Korean War and were with the Allies during the First Gulf War. Turkish soldiers have also served with United Nations peacekeeping troops in Somalia, Bosnia and Kosovo. And it is outstanding that they are joining us here today, particularly given the Anzac history.
There's that famous inscription on the Ataturk Memorial. Ataturk himself says to Australians, "You are now lying in the soil of a friendly country."
And here we have the Vietnam Army of the Republic of Vietnam Veterans Association, led by Jean Lam. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam Veterans Association, the ARVN, in New South Wales have marched since 1987. And the men and women marching are veterans who fought alongside Australian and American troops. And there are an estimated 15,000 Vietnam veterans from this conflict who now call Australia home. Importantly, at the end of the war, because they were in the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, they were forced to flee the country.
Fantastic to see them rounding out the foreign contingents in this year's march.
It sure is.
And here we have the King's School Cadet Corps Band, which is the oldest and one of the largest in Australia, involving 600 cadets.
That's amazing.
And right at the back, we have our SES marshals marching in their distinctive orange uniforms. The volunteers from the SES have been very busy since well before the crack of dawn this morning. Not only setting up for the dawn service, but then setting up for the march, assisting our veterans and organising the participants and making sure we're all safe today. The SES is the most widely used rescue and public safety organisation in New South Wales.
Quite a number of them wearing medals as veterans or even current serving members as well.
Very common to find those who have served in uniform transfer across the SES. And now finally...
Oh, look, it's just been so wonderful today to see everybody marching and so many wonderful images. You know, when we saw the special Z Force banner, I was remiss in saying to everybody that the last surviving Z Special Operator, Alan Russell, was out there marching today. We've seen so many wonderful lasting images, and it's wonderful to have been a part of this today.
I'd just like to give a special birthday shout out to Ron Leckie, who I think snuck through in one of the Land Rovers of the taxis early on, a 31 Squadron Navigator on Beaufighters during the war. He is turning 102 years old today, so happy birthday, Ron.
It's been a fantastic day, and it's been it's not about war today, it's been all about service and recognising and commemorating all Australians, both new and old, covering, serving and previous. So thank you all. Thank you to the RSL for making this happen.
And as the Anzac Day March here in Sydney comes to an end, let's hear from the Governor-General, who is in his final Anzac Day address, is acknowledging the contributions of all those who have served with respect and with pride.
On Anzac Day, we acknowledge those who have chosen to serve in our name and follow in the steps of our Anzac forebears. We acknowledge that they and their families disproportionately bear the cost of maintaining our freedoms and way of life. We honour them and give thanks. We remember and reflect. A beloved friend of Linda and mine passed away in 2008. Alec Hill was my military history lecturer at Duntroon. He was a veteran of the Second World War. A rat of Tobruk, Alec also fought at El Alamein and later in the Pacific. He knew combat and he knew Australian soldiers. I went to him for advice on many occasions. Before my first visit to Gallipoli, I asked Alec how I should approach the visit. His advice was quite simple. Go stand in the water at Anzac Cove and look up. I took Alec's advice, and as I looked up, I tried to put myself in the shoes of the Anzacs. Rising from the gloom were heights that appeared unscalable. No obvious tracks, numerous false crests, and an uncertain summit. How to go forward must have been the question on every mind. That morning's experience has returned to me many times during the past 5 years. I consider it a metaphor for the difficult experiences we have shared as a country. Drought, devastating bushfires, a pandemic, cyclones, and vast flooding. How to go forward has been the question asked by so many people and communities when they stared at the challenges ahead of them. What has brought me comfort and given me optimism for Australia has been their response. A response that I believe draws from the Anzac experience. The Anzac legacy, as we often call it. Give us a job to do, and we'll give it our best. While we're doing the job, we'll do it in a way that makes you proud. And while we're doing the job, we will look after our mates and continue to look after them when the job is done. It's a legacy that we aspire to embody. A legacy that we at times fail to meet. Yet it is a legacy that we remain determined to try to fulfill. It has helped define our national character. I know that members of the ADF hold to this legacy dearly. To not let the Anzacs down was a common motivator for my soldiers in my battalion when we deployed to Somalia. This being my last Anzac address as Governor-General and Commander-in-Chief, I want to assure our serving personnel that we respect their service. They should be proud of the uniform they wear. They are rightful inheritors and protectors of the Anzac legacy. We are proud of them. Today is special for another reason. It is the centenary of the first Anzac service conducted in Australia in the format we know today. Canon David Garland, an Anglican priest, had witnessed the Anzacs at war in Western Europe. He understood the legacy that they were creating and tried to capture it at that first service at Toowong Cemetery in Brisbane. Poignantly, that service ended with the familiar words, "Lest we forget." Lest we forget Canon Garland and his inspired vision for remembrance that honours the loved ones we have lost. Lest we forget our nation's modern roots and how they can help us as a country today. Lest we forget the sacrifice and pain of so many in uniform and at home in our country's history. Lest we forget.
That wraps up our broadcast for today. Thank you to my co-commentators and thank you for joining. We look forward to your company again next year, and we'll leave you now with some of the highlights from today's march.